My cruel stepmother killed my mother, and now she wants to take over my father's $200 million business. When I exposed her, she was filled with rage. She grabbed me angrily and hurled me off the balcony, yelling, "Your game is over." I fell into the garden below, sustaining a few injuries, but I was safe. I resolved to take revenge. The very next day, when she woke up, she was met with a shocking surprise that changed everything. My name is Emma Spencer. I'm 22 years old, and for most of my life, I thought I had everything I could ever want. I grew up in a beautiful brownstone house in an upscale New York City neighborhood with my father, Richard Spencer. He's not just my dad, he's my hero. He built his $200 million business empire from the ground up, and watching him work so hard always inspired me. For years, it was just the two of us. My mother, Sophia Spencer, passed away when I was 10. Her death was devastating, but Dad and I leaned on each other to get through it. We had a bond that felt unbreakable. Then Rachel came into our lives. Rachel Spencer, my stepmother, is everything you'd expect a socialite to be: glamorous, charming, and seemingly perfect. Dad met her at a charity gala a few years ago, and she swept him off his feet. At first, I was happy for him. He deserved to find love again, and Rachel seemed so kind and supportive. She even tried to bond with me, buying me gifts and asking about my life. But there was always something about her that didn't feel genuine. Looking back, the signs were there from the beginning, but I ignored them. Maybe I didn't want to seem like the jealous stepdaughter. Maybe I didn't want to upset my dad. Either way, I convinced myself that Rachel was just trying to find her place in our family. For a while, life seemed normal, happy even. Rachel became deeply involved in my dad's business. She had a knack for making him feel like she cared about his work, his dreams, and his legacy. She encouraged him to expand his investments, to take bigger risks. Dad trusted her completely. But then things started to change. It began with little things. Rachel would make subtle comments about me to my dad, planting seeds of doubt. She'd say I was acting ungrateful or that I didn't appreciate everything he'd done for me. I shrugged it off at first, thinking she was just trying to be a concerned stepmother. But those comments started to add up, and I noticed Dad looking at me differently, questioning me in ways he never had before. Around the same time, I started noticing how involved Rachel was in my dad's finances. She had access to accounts, she knew the ins and outs of his deals, and she often suggested new ventures that seemed unnecessarily risky. I didn't think much of it until I overheard a conversation between Rachel and someone on the phone. She was speaking in hushed tones, talking about transfers and liquidations. Her tone was cold and calculating, not at all like the woman she pretended to be around my dad. I told myself I was overthinking it, but a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. That feeling only grew stronger when I accidentally found an email on Rachel's laptop. It was from Martin Caldwell, my dad's business rival. He's infamous in the corporate world for using underhanded tactics to destroy his competition. The email was brief, but clear. They were working together. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Rachel, my dad's wife, was helping his biggest enemy. I didn't know what to do. How could I confront her without proof? And even if I did, would Dad believe me? Rachel had already been sowing seeds of doubt about me. If I went to him with just suspicions, she'd twist it to make me look paranoid or jealous. So I decided to dig deeper. I started watching Rachel more closely, looking for anything that could explain what she was doing. That's when I realized how dangerous she really was. One day, while Rachel was out, I searched her room. I knew it was wrong, but I didn't care. I had to know the truth. What I found chilled me to my core: financial documents, secret bank accounts, and emails between Rachel and Martin. They were planning to transfer $200 million of my dad's assets into accounts they controlled. They were going to bankrupt him and leave the country. But it didn't stop there. As I read through more of the emails, I discovered something even darker. Rachel had been involved in my mother's death. My mom's passing had always been explained as a tragic accident, but the emails suggested Rachel had orchestrated it. She wanted my dad and his money all along. I couldn't breathe. The woman I had tried so hard to accept into my family was a monster. She was manipulating my dad, planning to destroy him, and she had already taken my mom from me. I knew I had to do something, but I had no idea where to start. I tried talking to my dad, but it didn't go well. "Emma, this is ridiculous," he said when I told him Rachel was hiding something. "She loves us. Why would she do anything to hurt this family?" I wanted to scream, but I held it together. I realized then that Rachel had done more than manipulate my dad's business. She had manipulated his heart. He couldn't see her for who she really was. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt more alone than I ever had in my life. But I also felt something else: determination. Rachel might have fooled my dad, but she wasn't going to fool me. I would find a way to stop her, no matter what it took. What I didn't know was how far Rachel would go to protect her secrets, and how dangerous she could really be. After that night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Rachel's face and thought about the emails I had read. The realization that she was planning to ruin my father and had a hand in my mother's death haunted me. I had to act, but I couldn't do it recklessly. Rachel had already managed to turn my dad against me in subtle ways. If I made one wrong move, she would twist it to her advantage. I started by keeping a low profile. Rachel was sharp, and if she noticed me acting differently, she'd know I was onto her. I pretended everything was normal. I greeted her in the mornings, had polite conversations over dinner, and even smiled when she asked about my studies. It was exhausting, but I knew I needed time to gather solid proof. To do that, I began digging into Rachel's life. I checked her laptop whenever she left it unattended, copied files onto a USB drive, and even took photos of the documents I found in her closet. The more I uncovered, the more horrifying the picture became. Rachel had been planning this for years. She'd ingratiated herself into my father's life, gained his trust, and slowly taken control of his finances. She and Martin Caldwell were working together to siphon off the $200 million my father had built over decades. It wasn't just business, though. Rachel had personal motives, too. In one particularly damning email to Martin, she wrote, "Once we finish this, Richard will have nothing left to cling to, just me. He won't even look at that little brat of a daughter." My stomach churned as I read her words. She didn't just want to steal from my dad. She wanted to destroy our family. But the worst discovery came one evening when I found an old folder hidden in Rachel's closet. Inside were records of a life insurance policy for my mother, Sophia Spencer, and details about the car accident that had killed her. There were notes scribbled in Rachel's handwriting about the timing of the accident, as well as a payment made to someone I didn't recognize. My mom's death had always felt sudden and senseless, but now I knew it wasn't an accident. Rachel had orchestrated it to get my dad and his fortune. I felt sick. Betrayal doesn't even begin to describe what I felt. The woman I had trusted, who had acted like she cared about our family, was a murderer. I wanted to confront her right then and there, to scream at her, to tell my dad everything. But I knew better. She was too good at manipulating him, and I didn't have enough evidence to make him believe me yet. The only person I could trust was myself. Over the next few weeks, I built my case. I gathered emails, bank records, and anything else that connected Rachel to her crimes. I even started recording our conversations when she let her guard down. It wasn't easy. Every day felt like walking a tightrope. Rachel seemed to sense that I was up to something. She started asking more questions, watching me more closely, and making subtle comments to undermine me. One night, she cornered me in the kitchen. "Emma," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "you've been so quiet lately. Is everything okay?" Of course, I lied, forcing myself to meet her gaze. "Just busy with school?" Her smile widened, but her eyes stayed cold. "Good. I'd hate to think you were distracted by anything. It's important to focus on the things that matter." I nodded, my heart pounding. Rachel might have been suspicious, but she didn't know exactly what I was doing. Not yet. Things came to a head one night when I overheard Rachel and Martin on a video call. I was coming downstairs to get some water when I heard their voices from the study. The door was slightly ajar and I froze, listening. "Everything's on track," Rachel was saying. "The transfers will be finalized next week. Once it's done, Richard will be wiped out. And the girls? Martin asked. His voice was cold and calculating. She's a nuisance, Rachel said. But she won't be a problem for much longer. I didn't wait to hear more. I bolted back upstairs, my mind racing. Rachel was planning something. I didn't know what, but I could feel the danger closing in. That night, as I lay in bed, I tried to think of my next move. I needed to warn my dad, but I couldn't go to him without undeniable proof. Rachel was too good at twisting the truth. I decided to wait a few more days to gather just a little more evidence before confronting him. But Rachel didn't give me the chance. The next night, she came into my room. I was sitting on my bed, scrolling through my phone, when she walked in without knocking. She looked furious. "You've been snooping, haven't you?" she demanded, her voice low and venomous. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, trying to stay calm. "Don't play dumb, Emma," she snapped. "I know you've been poking around where you don't belong." I stood up, my heart racing. "What are you so afraid of, Rachel? That I'll tell Dad the truth? That he'll see you for who you really are?" Her face twisted with rage. "You think you're so clever, don't you? But you don't understand what you're dealing with." Before I could respond, she lunged at me. I stumbled back, and before I knew it, she pushed me toward the open balcony door. I tried to grab onto something, but it was too late. I fell. I don't remember hitting the ground. When I woke up, I was lying in the garden, dazed and in pain. But somehow, miraculously, I was alive. Rachel must have thought I was dead, because she wasn't there when I opened my eyes. As I lay there, one thought burned in my mind. I had to stop her, no matter what it took. When I woke up in the garden, my entire body ached. My head was spinning, and my heart pounded as the reality of what had just happened hit me. Rachel had tried to kill me. She didn't just want to scare me off or silence me. She wanted me gone for good. But she had failed. I was alive, and now, nothing could stop me from exposing her. I managed to drag myself back inside, careful not to make a sound. I couldn't let Rachel know I had survived. I limped to my room, locked the door, and sat on the floor, trembling. My injuries weren't severe, cuts, bruises, and soreness from the fall, but my mind was racing. I couldn't stay silent anymore. Rachel wasn't just a liar and a thief. She was a murderer. I had to act fast, but I had to be smart about it. The next morning, I pretended nothing had happened. I stayed in my room most of the day, claiming I wasn't feeling well. Rachel didn't come to check on me, which told me she believed I had fallen accidentally, or worse, that she thought I wouldn't dare say anything. It was a small advantage, but I intended to use it. I spent the day going through the evidence I had collected. Emails, bank records, and notes. All of it painted a damning picture of Rachel and her scheme with Martin Caldwell. I also found a voice memo on my phone from the night I overheard their conversation in the study. It was shaky, but it captured Rachel's words, "Richard will be wiped out." It wasn't just my proof, it was my lifeline. But I knew evidence alone wasn't enough. I needed to make sure Rachel couldn't manipulate my dad once I confronted her. I needed witnesses. That's when I got the idea to use the upcoming charity gala. It was the perfect opportunity. My dad's business associates, family friends, and even the media would be there. Rachel wouldn't be able to weasel her way out of it if I exposed her in front of everyone. In the days leading up to the gala, I stayed out of Rachel's way, pretending to be the obedient and oblivious stepdaughter she wanted me to be. Every interaction with her was a performance. She smiled at me like nothing had happened, her eyes gleaming with false warmth. But I saw through her act now. I could feel her watching me, trying to gauge whether I suspected anything. Little did she know, I had already planned her downfall. On the day of the gala, I prepared everything. I organized the evidence into a presentation and brought copies of key documents on a flash drive. I even rehearsed what I was going to say. It had to be clear and undeniable, leaving no room for Rachel to twist the narrative. This was my chance to expose her, to save my dad, and to finally get justice for my mom. When the evening arrived, I dressed in my best and walked into the grand ballroom with my head held high. Rachel was already there, charming the guests as usual. She didn't even glance at me. She was too busy playing the perfect hostess. My dad, oblivious as ever, stood beside her, proud and unaware of the storm about to hit. I felt a pang of sadness for him. He had no idea what Rachel had done, what she was capable of. But he would soon. As the evening wore on, I waited for the perfect moment. The room was filled with influential people, business partners, journalists, and friends of the family. I walked up to the stage, my heart pounding. Gripping the microphone tightly, I said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's something important I need to share." The room fell silent, and all eyes turned to me. My dad looked confused, but Rachel's face froze. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. "This isn't easy for me to say," I began, my voice trembling but steady. "But there's something you all need to know about Rachel Spencer." The truth was about to come out, and there was no turning back. As I stood on the stage, every pair of eyes in the room was fixed on me. My hands trembled, but I tightened my grip on the microphone. This was it, the moment I'd been working toward. I glanced at Rachel, whose smile had vanished. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for a way out, but there wasn't one. "My stepmother, Rachel Spencer," I began, "has been hiding something terrible from all of us. Tonight, I'm here to tell you the truth." A murmur rippled through the crowd, but I pressed on. I didn't have time to let fear take over. I needed to say everything. Rachel has been working with Martin Caldwell, my father's biggest business rival. Together, they've been plotting to steal $200 million from my father's company, dismantling everything he's worked for. Gasps echoed through the room. My dad stood frozen, his face pale with confusion and disbelief. "Emma, what are you talking about?" he asked, his voice shaking. "I have proof," I said, forcing myself to stay calm. I pulled out a flash drive from my purse and handed it to the event's AV technician. "Please show everyone the files." The technician hesitated, but I nodded, and the presentation began to play on the large screen behind me. Emails between Rachel and Martin flashed on the screen, detailing their plan to siphon my dad's assets into offshore accounts. Financial records showed suspicious transfers linked to Rachel. The final slide was the recording of Rachel's voice saying, "Once it's done, Richard will be wiped out." The room was dead silent. I turned back to the audience. "This isn't just about money. Rachel has gone further than any of us could imagine. She's not only betrayed my father but also had a hand in the death of my mother, Sophia Spencer. Her death wasn't an accident, it was planned." Another wave of shocked whispers spread through the crowd. My dad staggered back a step, his face contorted with disbelief. "Emma, is this true?" he asked, his voice barely audible. I didn't have to answer. Rachel's reaction said it all. She lunged toward me, her voice sharp and venomous. "You don't know what you're talking about, you little brat. You're making this up." But before she could reach me, 2 uniformed police officers stepped forward. I had contacted them earlier and shared the evidence. They had been waiting in the wings for this exact moment. "Rachel Spencer," one officer said, "you're under arrest for conspiracy, embezzlement, and attempted murder." Rachel's face crumpled. "Richard, you can't believe this," she cried, turning to my dad. "You know I'd never hurt you." "She's lying." But my dad didn't move. His face was a mixture of pain and anger as he stared at her, realizing the truth. "How could you?" he whispered, his voice heavy with betrayal. "How could you do this to me, to Emma?" As the officers led Rachel away, the room erupted into a frenzy of murmurs and gasps. I stood there, my heart pounding but my resolve unshaken. It was over. The lies, the manipulation, the fear, it was all over. In the days that followed, Rachel's accomplice, Martin Caldwell, was also arrested. The stolen assets were recovered, and my dad's company was saved. But the damage Rachel had done to our family wasn't so easily repaired. My dad and I had a lot to work through. He was devastated by the role he'd played in letting Rachel into our lives and for doubting me when I tried to warn him. "I'm so sorry, Emma," he told me one evening as we sat in the living room. "I should have believed you. I let her blind me to the truth." "It's not your fault," I said, though part of me was still hurt. "She fooled both of us. But we're still here. We can rebuild together. And we did. Slowly, we began to heal. My dad focused on making his business stronger than ever, while I returned to college with a newfound sense of purpose. Rachel's betrayal had scarred us, but it also reminded me of the importance of resilience, truth, and justice. The wound she left behind will never fully disappear, but as my dad and I look forward, I know one thing for sure. We're stronger now. Together, we're rebuilding not just our family but our trust, determined to protect what truly matters. This was our story, a story of betrayal, greed, and redemption. A story of truth winning over lies. And a story of resilience in the face of darkness.